Welcome to RCR Wireless News. I'm Martha DeGrasse, and I'm here with Jonathan Adelstein, President of the Wireless Infrastructure Association. Thanks for making the time, Jonathan.
Thanks, Martha.
We just heard a great panel about regulatory issues surrounding small cell rollouts around the country. And it sounds like there may be some federal action to help some of these companies work with the cities around the country that they're having problems with, and just really different experiences in different cities. So what are you hearing and what are you working on?
We're working with the FCC on steps they can take to bring up sort of those recalcitrant communities that aren't getting with the program. A lot of communities are doing a very good job. They understand that if they get 5G, they get all the benefits of for the economy, for connected car, for the Internet of Things, for people to be able to communicate and get broadband at incredible speeds wherever they are. But other communities are only focused on what does it look like on the top of a street pole, or what does it look like on the top of a light pole, which is really short-sighted. And the FCC, led by a visionary chairman with a lot of bipartisan support on this issue, is saying, what can we do to say, there's sort of a basic rule here that you have to allow these facilities to go in. You can't deny wireless service under the Communications Act. And it's getting to the point where some communities are dragging their heels so much that the FCC is looking at ways they could bring them along. So they are considering putting out a notice of proposed rulemaking to begin the discussion maybe in the next few months, which was really, really exciting. And the other issue they're talking about working on is tribal issues. We've been getting increasing demands from a handful of tribes, not from all tribes, but for large fees to review applications that are far afield from their traditional areas of concern. So we're seeing huge delays and costs go up from tribal nations that are really abusing the process. So they're talking about addressing that as well. So we're very excited. Some of the big issues for our industry are getting the attention at the FCC that they are.
So what can the FCC do? I heard Smitty say that the FCC doesn't want to take zoning authority away from the cities. So what can the FCC exactly do?
Well, there's sort of a balance where you don't want to take authority away. At the same time, you want to encourage them to move expeditiously and move in a fair way that doesn't disrupt the ability of our providers to provide service. So they are some type of balance. We don't know exactly what it is that they have in mind, but they have authority under Section 253 and 332 of the Communications Act to actually preempt localities if they have to. So we're working with them to figure out what that might be. I'm not even sure exactly, it's sort of a black box right now what they're going to come out with, but we are going to have to debate it after it comes out, because it'll just be a notice, which will then lead to a dialogue with the industry and with localities, and we'll file on that and try to see where we can get it, where there's a balance. You know, we're not trying to say localities are not working cooperatively with us. Most of them are. It's the handful, and we heard today on this panel, it was somebody threw out the figure 20%.
Yeah.
As an example, that are just dragging their heels. And the problem is they're not going to get the service. They're left behind in 3G world or early 4G world. They'll never make it to 5G. Some of them won't even make it to 4G. And it's depriving their citizens of all of the benefits that other communities have that are allowing it to go in.
Right. Are some of the cities realizing that it's also sort of a way for them to bridge the digital divide? Because the cities, I think, maybe do have some leverage to ask the carriers to go into some of the underserved neighborhoods at the same time they go into the neighborhoods they most want to serve, right?
Yeah, some are looking at that and thinking progressively about how they get their entire community served. Others are looking at it as an opportunity to extract some revenue, and that can really slow things down. There's an assumption that wireless has deep pockets, and they don't realize that wireless carriers have been providing more and more bandwidth while their average revenue per user has been going down. So the consumers are getting more for less. You can't keep squeezing more and more out of them. It's not really fair. What they'll do is they'll just pick up and go somewhere else, where that community that stood in the way will be deprived.
Right, right. And what about the fees? Is that something the FCC might also look at?
Well, in terms of pricing, they certainly could. They could say that there's a reasonable type approach. On pole attachments, they've already set that. Some states have not opted into the FCC pole attachment regime, but others have. And even outside of that, they can say these are sort of presumptively fair prices, reasonable prices, and some prices are so high that are being proposed that they would be presumed to be unreasonable. So we're not asking for massive preemption here. We're just saying people need to be reasonable to allow us to deploy. And and sort of take out the worst actors and bring everybody up to a sort of basic level that is reasonable is a good term. It's actually a term in the statute.
All right. So which are some of the cities that really get it and that have moved forward?
Well, there's a lot of cities that get it and move forward. You know, some cities that are engaged with Google Fiber have said, do whatever you can. You know, Kansas City said, come on in, and other communities across the country are just opening the way for it. I don't want to single out ones that aren't doing well, but you know, New York City has more, and Chicago has done a great job of opening up to all kinds of small cells and DAS. And they're really being innovative in how they do it, and they need it because those really dense areas have to have a high number of antennas on virtually every quarter mile in order to provide the service, or even tighter.
Yeah, especially when you talk about these driverless cars, right? So when you have a city like Chicago that moves forward, obviously somebody or many people need to put the cells on the poles, attach them, test them, optimize the network. Can you give us a little bit of information about some of the steps that your group is taking to increase skill sets within the wireless workforce?
Well, it is very complicated. Today, we heard from Crown Castle's CEO that they have a lot of issues finding the workforce they need to build these out. It's a lot harder to build these small cell networks than it is to build a tower, which is a tried and true methodology, but each small cell system is customized. It's operating in a very congested RF environment. It's not just pulling cable and then slapping an antenna on the end of it. Some people that are doing this know how to pull cable, but then they don't realize that when you get to the antenna part, that there's a lot of issues with how you optimize that, how it fits in with the macro network to make sure that the system works. So we are launching a training initiative to provide baseline training for people in this industry. And also we're working towards apprenticeships,
right,
so that they can actually learn on the job and have those tools. And there's a lot of funding available with apprenticeships, both under the GI Bill, if people hire veterans, or state apprenticeship offices that are flush with cash to basically help underwrite training for industries to get involved. And the wireless industry hasn't traditionally been a apprenticeship industry, but through the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program that Scott Kisting from UD has sort of helped to pioneer, and we serve on the board, that's possible we could change that, and we could bring in a model that really leads people to know what they're doing when they're getting out there and deploying these. So we'd like to do an apprenticeship in small cell and DAS deployment.
Yeah. So what are the skill sets that you would tell people that are starting their careers and want to get involved in wireless infrastructure to develop?
Well, the first thing, of course, is understanding RF. So we're going to put out an RF 101 type course that will teach people how the environment that they're working in is affected by different antennas. What is basic RF? What's propagation? How does it work? And then we work on specific antenna deployment. How do you do that when you're deploying an antenna? What is the impact on the environment that you're working in with other antennas that are operating perhaps in the same area with the macro network? We're looking at how the cable and the fiber connect to it so that that's all done properly and there aren't issues with how that's being laid out that are reducing throughput on the systems. And we're bringing together experts from the industry to develop a curriculum that will meet the exact needs of the industry itself and that will support an apprenticeship. So as you're going through an apprenticeship, you have materials that are online, classroom available, wherever you need to be on the job.
That's great.
So we'll have a sort of comprehensive suite of available training.
All right. Anything else that you want to discuss while we're here?
Well, we thank you for being here. It's been a great show. We have a huge turnout. It's really the premier small cell and DAS show. So we have a sold out exhibit hall with all kinds of great technology. The industry's dynamic. We're at a point where I think it's about to take off. We keep saying that, but at this time I think it's really going to happen.
The exhibit hall has a lot of focus on in-building solutions. I think that there's we're talking, in many of the panels about outdoor, but there seems to be a big vendor focus on in-building. Would you agree?
I would. There's a huge market in building ahead of us where enterprise is demanding better coverage indoors that the macro system might not be covering, or macro is getting congested. So if they can offload some of that inside buildings, it's better for the provider and the carrier. It's better for the customers inside. But a lot of work needs to be done and there's not a lot of cash to pay for it.
Yeah.
Carriers don't want to necessarily pay for mid-sized buildings. Mid-sized building owners don't quite see the value. So there's some innovative ideas that we're hearing about on the showroom floor there about very cost-effective solutions to medium-sized enterprise or medium-sized buildings, 200,000 to 500,000 feet that don't have their own coverage. I think that people are finding ways to deal with that in a cheap way so that you can actually make it work, make the business case work.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way.
That's
All
right.
Jonathan Adelstein, Wireless Infrastructure Association, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martha, for having me.